So I'd like to introduce our moderator for the evening, Mr. Guido Campello, CEO of Cosabella, and our three panelists. And we thank them for their time. So first we have Bob Dzielak. He is Commercial Director of Apparel, North and South America for INVISTA. Edward Hertzman, Publisher of Sourcing Journal. And Margaret, Clougher, Vice President of Production, Technical Design, American Apparel, Aerie. So thank you so much. I'm going to turn the program over to Guido. Thank you.
Good evening. I think this is on, yeah? Great. Good evening, everybody. This is actually one of my favorite topics in what I do every day, which is finding out where we get the good stuff. Right? Every great recipe needs its ingredients, and we work with hundreds of people to make those ingredients happen. And of course, as you go down the supply chain, there's thousands upon thousands more that support this great product that we all create. I'd say that one of the things I'm asked the most is, how do you find what you need? And it's a question that keeps changing, I think, every single day. We find new ways or new opportunities arise. But I do want to take a moment for each of our guests to take a minute to speak about themselves, where they come from, the sides they represent, because they're all from very unique sides of the, let's say, sourcing experience. And I ask one very emotional question, which is, in one or two sentences, what is sourcing today? I will tell you, for me, it is a world of possibility, and it's ever-changing. Those are two things for me that represent what sourcing is, and that what we'll touch on. So, Bob, if you can start.
So first of all, thank you for the opportunity to represent the fibers business, which is the beginning of that value chain. My background, I've been in this business a long time. I see a lot of familiar faces out there. I've worked with DuPont since 1984. 2004, we were bought by Koch Industries. Koch Industries is a $120 billion privately owned company, 100,000 employees, 60 countries, represented 60 countries. It's been a good move for us. My background, I've managed the intimate apparel business for DuPont for a while. Right now, I'm the commercial director, mostly responsible for sales for Canada, U.S., Mexico, Central America, not all of South America. I don't have Brazil and Argentina. But if I keep rolling the dice, maybe I'll get that before my career is over. Biggest elements of sourcing, again, I'm kind of the old man up here. I've been around a long time. I'm a kid, not anymore. Used to be. It's changing, constantly changing. I mean, if I think back of 30 years ago, what the business was and where it was and how it was done, versus today, and even today, year to year, it's just constantly changing. And you see that with what we're doing in terms of where we're building our fiber plants. We're building in China, we're building in Brazil, we're shutting them down in the U.S. We lost 2 competitors in the U.S. because the business here just can't support that much capacity anymore. So my reference to supply and sourcing, it's constantly changing. Thank you.
Thank you. Eddie?
First, I want to start off by saying I'm not normally this unkempt. I'm going to Karachi on Pakistan on Saturday, so this is my local attire, I guess you would say. So I'll shave when I get back. So my background, although I'm up here for Sourcing Journal and the media business, is really sourcing and manufacturing. Prior to founding Sourcing Journal, I worked for 2 large South Asian sourcing companies. I really, by accident, started Sourcing Journal, and then we fast forward to today. We have Sourcing Journal, we have Rivet, which is a denim trade publication, and Vamp, which is a footwear trade publication. But in addition to that business, I also continue to do a lot of sourcing and manufacturing for retailers. So that keeps me in the business and keeps me on the ground and going to wonderful places like Pakistan and Bangladesh. In terms of, what's the question?
2 emotional sentences about sourcing, generalized.
2 emotional. Well, one thing I would like to say is, although I agree that it's ever changing and there's a world of possibilities, I think for the most part, no disrespect to anyone in the room, we are really uninformed. We are a really stubborn group of people. We're not keeping up with the technology, we're not keeping up with the changes in the world, and for the most part, we're not eager to, we're not getting on the planes, we're not going to these countries, there's a limited amount of information out there, which is why I started Sourcing Journal, not because it was a novel idea, because it was a needed idea. And so I think it's becoming more and more difficult, more and more complex, and I think the business is going to continue to be very, very challenging for those that do not want to change their way of thinking. But with that comes opportunity for new people to enter the space, and for those that are smart and savvy to be successful. So, good luck.
Margaret?
I'm Margaret Clougher. I handle production and effective design at Aerie, which is the intimate apparel division of American Eagle. I've been in the industry about 25 years, which is kind of shocking when I say that. For me, sourcing it's much like you said, started my career, I went to North Carolina to source the things I needed, and my company had its own manufacturing facilities. And, fast forward several years later, it's moved offshore, and today the big challenge is really where to find the right people, find the right product, what's your sphere of control, can you manage the costing, and can you get it faster?
Great. Thank you. So this kind of leads us to the first question. I think the elephant, when we talk about sourcing, is usually China, right? China becomes a big element in the conversation, and China versus U.S., even if there's that U.S. opportunity. I think we've touched on it slightly already. The specific question that came up in our discussion was, have there been changes that affect us regarding China production, prices, technology, quality, for example? We know there are. Could you give us some very specific things that maybe people haven't caught on to? We could start with you, Bob.
In terms of China, we see China kind of reached its peak. They're getting into more attractive industries. They're moving away from the textile business into more glamorous, higher paying. So we see it moving, to places like Vietnam. As TPP trade agreements come up, we see less impact of China, more impact of other countries. So China's still going to be a player, but again, fibers isn't the driver for this. It's the needle. You got to follow the needle.
Eddie, any comments on China specifically?
Well, I think this is not a new conversation. What's next after China? Where are people going? Yeah, the obvious answers are we see an increase in Vietnam, we see an increase in Vietnam, Bangladesh. For the most part, China will continue to be number one. Even if they lose a couple of percentage points here and there, their volume of exports is so great that it's hard for anyone. I don't even think you take the capacity of Latin America, Vietnam, Pakistan, Mauritius, square it and multiply by 2, it can even equal China. So I think when we talk about China, China's also, where in China are you working? So maybe you don't have an office in Shanghai anymore. Maybe you're in Guangzhou, but the bus goes 3 hours to the mainland China. So I think there's still a lot of opportunities in China. From a manufacturing perspective, last time I was there earlier this year, half the denim factories I went to were producing for the domestic market, for the local market. So the factories may be busy, maybe they're not busy making our product. I think it's going to continue to be a challenge, as Bob said. When you have a one-child policy, no parent's dream now is for their child to be a seamstress in Nimbo. So they aspire to do better things with their lives, which is actually very good for the world, but not good if you want to make private label clothes for TJ Maxx. So I think China will still remain very, very important, but it's going to be challenging from a price point perspective.
And all of that continues to be true for us in our everyday life. And I think what's interesting, particularly for our industry, because it is such a specialized stitching, that the intimate apparel industry has been one of the slower industries to move out of China. Even we stayed in South China for a long time, so integration has been a huge challenge for us. And as we move the manufacturing base out of China, there's still a lot there, but the actual supply chain for the manufacturing base has been a bit slower in our categories to move out of South China. So while we're moving into Cambodia, we're moving into northern Thailand by, Mesa by the Burmese border and potentially to Vietnam, and hopefully TPP actually favors up a bit and won't be on board in some of our categories. The supply chain has been a bit slower to move, so it still creates a challenge where you're trying to offset costing in a labor perspective. We're spending some of that in moving goods around, so we need the industry to kind of follow the stitching a bit faster.
So what is really preventing the U.S. from forming a very aggressive market? I'm going to speak in my experience because, we actually as a company haven't developed so much in Asian production, but in European production. And we actually have the Chinese that have come into Italy and set up shop within Italy and get to do made in Italy, which is a constant issue. And as we see more of this happening, we actually now see the Romanians doing it, and even some from the Czech Republic setting up factories within Italy. So what stops that from happening, let's say, in the U.S.? I know that obviously laws and so forth, but we see obviously what we've got in our neighborhoods here, and we know what's down in Canal Street and so forth. What's that kind of infiltration in the U.S.? What kind of opportunity is there still for what even happened with American Apparel in Los Angeles, right? Which is a significant example of where there were kind of loopholes with labor. So why isn't there more inventiveness, let's say, in production that way? What's really protecting the U.S. that way?
I think it really comes down to simple economics. I was asked to write an article last year for the Huffington Post, A Business of Fashion, about manufacturing in the USA, and I got a lot of hate mail after that. And I'm not trying to not sound patriotic. I think it'd be great if there was manufacturing here in the States, but if you think about it, Bangladesh we pay, after the 77% increase in minimum wage, $68, $70, even say $100 a month. The average factory worker in America makes, I don't know, $15, $16, $17 an hour, which means at the end of one day, by lunch, he will earn more, or she will earn more, than someone in Bangladesh makes in a month or two. That's very simple. If we want to get into more politically incorrect statements, if someone in America is not doing a good job at work, we got to sit them down with HR, we got to have a nice little conversation with them. In Bangladesh, if there's an air shipment looming and you got to get some units out, they're sitting in the factory and they're going to sew the garments until 9, 10 o'clock at night. If we just look at very simple economics, I don't understand how it's even possible. I mean, all we do is beat up factories all day long, and to me, China is like manufacturing in Brooklyn now. It's become that expensive. So it's just not realistic. Also, even if we started to open up factories here in the States, who the hell's going to work in them? There's no one trained to work in the factories. So I think there's a lot of things working against us. Unless we want to create, I think it'd be more important for the next generation to study engineering or technology and figure out how to automate some of the process, which would be a disaster for the millions of people working in the developing world. But that's where there's opportunities here in the state. The one caveat to that is if you are willing to buy a $300 or $400 pair of jeans or a $100 t-shirt, then there's absolutely an opportunity for you to make that, or for a company that's to make that in LA or Brooklyn and sell that to the specialty boutiques. But I do not think American Apparel or Everlane or Save Khaki or any of these guys will be taking the Herald Square space that Macy's occupies anytime soon. So.
I think the other challenge attached to that is kind of what you alluded to. There's a whole compliance piece to it that makes it very difficult for them to actually afford to manufacture in this country. And if they go around the loopholes, you create a lot of brand integrity issues and eventually can really damage your company or your brand.
Okay. I think you touched on one point that I would like to speak about, which is know-how, right? Being able to do it. I think our generation is, we've all got arthritis of the thumbs, I think, at this point, right? So in Italy, we have this problem. And we have, great brands like Cucinelli who are investing back into their city and into their town, really, because they need it to do their production. And so they got to, build that know-how. So the incoming generations don't have that skill set. I imagine China, at this point, because of demand, has training, or they definitely have a generational thing happening where it's stopping in other places. Would you say that, the European sourcing place, or even North Africa, these places that are going to struggle generationally, will end up just dying away as well? Or are there things in place, even by some bigger industries, that are trying to actually teach incoming?
I would go back a little bit in terms of the U.S. You look at the yarn business in the U.S., there's a lot of investment coming back into the U.S., particularly for cotton spinning and stuff. And, there's a reason for that. Cotton's cheap here, low labor, very highly technical technology, and you can compete. They can compete globally with anybody when it comes to cost. We're a chemical company. We're not really a fiber business. We're a chemical company. We're mixing a bunch of chemicals that at the end you get into, an elastic yarn. So we're a little different, and we're not competing in the textile economy or with textile wages, but more on the chemical side. And there's a place for us here. Again, it's, we have chemical engineers. We have, people like that working in our business. So there's a future for that kind of industry here. It's not gone completely. There are some low labor, highly technical, I think, opportunities that are going to continue to, be around for people. Would I have my kids get into the textile business today? Probably not, right? But, I don't know.
Would you have any other comments on that, or the last point? If there's other places that maybe you've worked besides China, Vietnam, have you worked with Europe?
There's always a new emerging kind of third world.
Can you speak to that?
Eventually, there'll be no place left. It's the end of the line. There are North Africa, Sub-Saharan region. The places are starting to build there, but the infrastructure in the country has to come first. You can bring in manufacturing, but you can't move the goods, or they don't have a steady labor force, or they don't have steady power. It's a challenge. So, and particularly intimate apparel, is the slowest of the slow to move. We are the most resistant industry. While there is true that it's a special technique from a stitching perspective, it's trainable, but our supply chain doesn't move, and then we have a difficult time moving our product.
Absolutely. I think we have, in our bras we say that we have 27 different components. So 32 years, we have 27 for some reason. So we're trying to cut costs. So in Italy we figured out how to sneak some out.
And it's not just the components. We have a very specific expectation for measurements. Our tolerances are very, very slow. It's an inch big in the chest. Okay, it's a medium. It's not small anymore. Our tolerance is an eighth of an inch, a 16th of an inch, and we're highly labor intensive. So we're slow as an industry, particularly for us.
I think you're both touching on a very important part of when it comes to a sourcing strategy. You just can't look at a map and say, I want to go there. You have to, and I think that's a mistake. Being in the media, everyone loves a sensational headline. Myanmar, the next hot spot is Africa, the next not hot. But it really comes down to product. So you may make your high-end specialty, fashion sweaters, for lack of a better term, in Ludhiana. And that may ship to the Macy's and Dillard's of the world. But then you make the special cut version of that, in Bangladesh. You may make your women's designer denim in China, but then you may do the men's version in boys in Karachi. And because there's a different skill set, a different price point, a different supply chain, and that's where companies start to have to, it's not like, what's the expression, one brush stroke for, one canvas. If you look at, Inditex, which is the supply chain that everyone, fantasizes over, look at how many different countries they're in. They have agents, they have their own office, they work factory direct. They're all over the world. And there's something to be said for that. In terms of developing, generations of workers, it's like anything else. The first generation is in the textile business, then they're going to get into the bag business. The next generation is going to be in the electronic business. The fourth generation is going to be iBankers. And by the fifth generation, they'll start all over again. But there's a progression. We're seeing this in every single country. And that's just the reality of the world. I do agree. Unless Marco Polo resurrects and finds another piece of land somewhere, the concept of something new isn't really going to happen. Africa, if you speak to PVH or VF, they're going to probably tell you that that is something on their radar. They're very open about their investment into that country, but it's for they're making a long-term investment, and that's a country for programs. You know, you may see in Old Navy a fleece piece or a basic jean or something like that coming out of there because they're programming that 12 months out. There's no just-in-time fast fashion coming out of Africa. You're lucky if the goods come out of there at all. So yeah, if you get an order for 1,200 pieces, you know, I really hope the sourcing director doesn't run up to their owner and says, I got a great idea, I want to go to, you know, I don't know, Zimbabwe tomorrow. But these are markets that will progress. I think the same thing for Myanmar, you know. They're going to build their infrastructure. Some of the large institutions will come in there. They'll be the guinea pigs. But there's a lot of work to be done there. You know, is there testing facilities there? Is there nominated trim suppliers there? How often are the boats leaving the ports? Can you get a cell phone reception? Do you get kidnapped? If you get kidnapped, can they find you? I mean,
It's true.
it's all real fears.
Yeah, I think our insurance went up last year for kidnapping. So for our production manager, it's actually a consideration. And you know, we took as a company, Cosabella took a step to explore Eastern Europe, explore Northern Africa. And if you think about it, you know, going to Northern Africa is like going to North Carolina, right, from Italy. It's an hour flight to Tunisia. But it is like going to another planet. And we had actually set up shop, we were ready to go. There's other great brands that work there and have been able to establish it. And then the Arab Spring happened. Obviously our pricing and everything changed, but we had to adapt to the political climate. And sure enough, after about 2 strange attempts, I think, at kidnapping is what we thought, with our production manager, we decided, hey, Italy's great. So let's hold back a bit. So we've seen that over and over. But what's curious now, and I'd like some feedback, maybe you guys have your opinions, but as a brand, you know, we've got to see this Euro come in the early 2000s and kind of, you know, crush our made in Italy dream. But then somehow we made it sustainable. And now we're seeing, you know, the total opposite happening. We're seeing some great opportunity outside of our home country and within Europe, actually, especially for sourcing for fibers and so forth. And we're seeing a resurrection of some of the smaller mills and so forth that really just held on for their dear life because their kids were in the system. Do you have any comments on what's happening in Europe now with this exchange and with the prediction that we're going to see 90, 85 cents exchange?
I don't want to name any brands, but some of my contacts in Pakistan right now are getting a lot of pressure for some large European retailers basically saying, hey, I need a reduction in price because, you know, I need more euros to buy those goods that I committed to. Now that puts a lot of fear into the Bangladesh factories because in the back of their mind they're like, oh shit, it's being recorded. It's, because they could lose business to a country like Turkey, or something that in the past wasn't affordable. Now maybe it's a little bit more, but it's a lot quicker, you know, it's easier to work there. So that value add that Bangladesh may have from a strict price perspective, maybe it's not there. Which opens up a whole other can of worms when you start putting a lot of pressure on factories to reduce costs, when every single input cost, having said that I understand cotton is a little depressed right now, but every single input cost from the labor, to the electricity, to the food, because, you know, there's a major inflation going on in these countries, are causing all the factory costs to go up. They're asking for the prices to go down, then we open up, you know, we start talking about compliance concerns. So, it is an issue, and, you know, great opportunity for some, a disaster for others, but it all comes down to dollars and cents, and I do think, you make a valid point, I do think you'll see a small increase in you know, European manufacturing.
Do they hum at all about the Merkel-Obama accords of potentially finding, you know, a customs reduction and so forth? Do they talk at all about what's happening between Europe and the U.S. when you're in Asia? That's a question. Do they pay attention or not really? They don't care. Okay.
You've got to remember, still Turkey in all these countries, from an American perspective, is very expensive.
Yep.
It's very specialized. And still, it's this very, 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 very small percentage of manufacturing in terms of exports coming from there here. So it's not like it's going to be, even if some trade agreement comes into play, it's going to cause a major shift in manufacturing. I wouldn't see that happen. If TPP and everything goes through, yes, it'll be an advantage for Vietnam and those doing business there. Again, there's a lot of dotted lines, the yarn forward component to it. It's not so simple.
I can't speak of Europe, but I can speak to Colombia, South America, and Mexico.
Please.
I mean, the Colombian peso has devalued probably 35, 40% in the last 3 or 4 months. So there's huge opportunities, if you will. And I'd like to ask some questions around people who are sourcing around how much exchange rate impacts your sourcing decisions. Because we're seeing the same thing in Mexico. The Mexican peso has probably, devalued 20, 25%. It's
The FX piece always factors in, but you have to look at it from a more longer-term perspective.
Right.
You're going to run in today and you're going to run out. That's not a great sourcing strategy. So if you think that there's a longer-term perspective, there's infrastructure in the country, if you haven't already been there, then you might be able to take some short-term opportunities. But you were mentioning, like, some of the people that held on, they'll get business. Their business will strengthen. And then you'll see over 12, 18, 24 months, is it sustainable? Because there's still the price-value equation. How much of your business is going to be at a certain cost, and that, you have to have this core long-term programs, your fast fashion, your just-in-time. You'll start paying a bit more and looking at the total landed components and balancing your business for your total IMU. So pieces of your business may make sense in some of those places, but the bigger chunk of your business is probably not sustainable.
Talking about Colombia, I experienced it actually where, 4, 5, 6, 7 years ago. Said, hey, come down, fly down and visit us. And they treated us, and they had this great kind of visitation. We did it with Peru, we did it with Mexico, Guatemala, all these kind of areas. Does that, on a smaller brand side, yeah, it impacted because it gave us an opportunity to see a world we didn't know and test it out. Does it affect bigger brand? Do they try to do things that can influence your decisions? Are there things like that?
We do. We try to keep a portion of our business, particularly because we are mostly U.S. based. We're an international brand, but most of our business is in North America. So there's a portion of that makes sense for us because it's quicker. So when you look at total landed costs, some of it evens out. But the true core programs, the 12-month programs, those are usually the ones you need the biggest margin on and have the ability to put in longer countries, have a long strategy, have a long-term partnership perspective. But there's definitely a piece of your business that plays into that. And we do keep some of our business in this hemisphere just for that reason.
A big thing to talk about, and it's going a little off topic, is this concept that the FOB price is what determines your margin. It's a little flawed. Because really, we can't go much lower. It's only going to go up. I can look at my crystal ball and would certainly tell you the prices will just keep going up year after year. The question is, what do we do about that? Now, again, I'll go back to Inditex and the fast fashion retailers in general. They don't necessarily buy cheaper than everyone else. What they do is they sell more full-price merchandise than the traditional department stores. And why do they do that? Because they get in the things really quick, and if it works, they're able to replenish really quickly, and if it doesn't work, they're really out of it very quickly. Where the traditional U.S. retailer or brand is programming something 12 months out. How do we know canary yellow or whatever is going to be hot 12 months from now? We don't. But yet, the politics and the process that companies have today are so rigid and so inflexible that we're not able to change how we do business. Again, I've worked with Inditex, so I speak of their successes so often, is they're inside the factory. The designer is also really the product development person, and it's really also the one purchasing the product. They get to the Bangladesh, they actually leave the hotel, they go to the factory, they make their comments, they go back 3 days later, they see the product again, they make a decision, and they go home. Not this whole nonsense. DHL the package here, then the designer looks at it, then the merchant looks at it, then the buyer looks at it. And then, the craziest thing after a week of it going around is someone in the U.S. that is college educated writes back, "This is too blue." The guy in Pakistan or India is too blue. Is that a Pantone number? And then they get this thing back again, and he writes, darker. It's absolute insanity, and we realize where all the money's going. It's going on the business class plane tickets, the intercontinental hotels. That's where we're getting crushed. It's not because the 10 cents you may have paid more because the rupee went up last year in Pakistan, it's because we're idiots. And look, I've done the same thing, we all do it, but this is, I think, as an industry, we have to get a little bit smarter. And we have to start saying, where are there opportunities to save money? Now, a lot of that money is in process and decision making. It's just not in getting up a factory. Because
There's very little left to do there.
there isn't. And the factory is actually the most important partner we have today. You know, many years ago I was in a conference, and this gentleman said, when is the last time you brought your factory a box of chocolates? You know, we expect them to wine and dine us. They don't, the good factories, the ones that are compliant, the ones that are, you know, state-of-the-art, that maybe actually air the goods if they're late, they don't need your business. You know, H&M has filled up all their capacity. So why should they deal with the 7th Avenue Garmento nonsense of nickels and dimes all day long when they don't need that? So the world is really changing. And also, they don't even want to be in that business whatsoever. They could sell the land, which is worth more than anything else, and, you know, get out of the business. So there are more factories closing every year than opening. So that's something to consider too. And on top of that, you have local consumption becoming huge. So those factories now are making products for the local market. So the question is, where are we going to make goods a few years from now? And especially if we build a bad rapport, and we build a bad name in a country because we, you know, these real shiesty tendencies we have, there's a bigger problem. But again, as an industry, we're very transactional in our mindset. So we're just fighting for the order today. Which is why these foreign companies like Uniqlo and Inditex say, hey, they're just going to crush us. Now Primark's coming in. I would look at that and be concerned. Not if you're selling $500 bras with 20 years bonus, but...
Thanks. Well, no, we definitely still have that concern, right? Cannibalization. So, I think from a brand perspective, what we see is the opportunity to work with our factories, work with our mills. We actually have been able to select key partners to help us work from the fiber up. So from a small family brand, what we do, and yes, I guess more luxury, we've been able to find those partners who could actually do good, better, best level pricing and allow us to work backwards. So we do have product that is in Neiman Marcus, Barney's, Bergdorf, and out of that same mill, same machine, with some of the same elements, we can produce made in Italy product that goes into JCPenney. So we've been able to kind of create these opportunities, but it's being on the spot, being there and knowing this culture. So for a brand, we have to marry into what our culture is. We do have to see what's out there and test everything. So we've touched Asia, we've touched North Africa, we've touched South America, and we found some good partners, but really kind of sprinkle it out. And the reason is because of what you're saying. There's a lot of good guys, a lot of good small guys actually out there that can do a lot of great work. And yes, they will talk nickel and dime because they're trying to nickel and dime us too, but we can send them the panettone at the end of the year, you know, Happy New Year, and give them even some extra bonus. We actually created a bonus structure even for our labs that surprised them to be able to kind of give them an opportunity. Something unique we also did as a brand, which I can share, is we actually looked at our labs, ranked them by priority, and did lab flows and said, you know, how much stock risk could I even take on just to make sure that they're staying fluid and running? So to work in Europe, the issue is all the fits and starts, right? In Asia, where they've got these much bigger production kind of capacity, yeah, I'm sure they have ups and downs, but they've got a flow going. You're talking about small family companies, literally the grandmother, the mother, the daughter, and you know eventually the granddaughters in there doing some element of the production. We just need to ensure that every day they know from Friday to Sunday that you know it's going to be the same situation. So as a brand, we had to take that step and say, hey, let me sit in their shoes. Do their kids want to work with us in the future, like we wanted to work with our parents? And two, how do we grow that continuity? So that's where I think, from a brand perspective, you're seeing a lot of self-reflection on who we are, what we are, how we're going to build it. I use Cucinelli again just because it's the most marketed example. Let's say he definitely has taken a step to become a patron of the country. And in Europe, as brands, we're becoming patrons of our country. If you look at Italy, you know, you think of, hey, what are the amazing companies out of Italy? It's either going to be cars, you know, food, or fashion in the end, right? Whereas in the U.S., you've got, you know, amazing industries or different things that you're thinking about. So we become kind of that hard element. So that self-reflection on how we work with factories is super important for a brand like ours. It's how we survive.
I think it's critically important for, it doesn't matter the size of your brand. Some of the people in the room I've worked with in the past, I've heard me say this before. You know, if you're in sourcing and production, 50% of your job is protecting your factory base because that's how you actually protect your company.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And look, you know, we talk about a lot of companies like to hop around. You know, we're going to say that's not the strategy. You want to create long-term partnerships. You want to figure out how to really build a business together. Jumping to a factory for 5 cents, having them mess up and then go back is not the right idea. But just to put an asterisk to that, creating healthy competition is not bad either. Another flaw which I think I've seen is this concept of one way of doing business. You got to think, if you have an office and you open it up, whether it's, I don't care if it's in Delhi, if it's in China, if it's in Bangladesh, it's your own office. There is no incentive for that country manager to run around and find the cheapest product. The reason I'm getting on the plane to go to Karachi is not because I have a timeshare there. It's because I know when I get there and I speak to Fawad, I can get the nickel and dime him down a couple of rupees here and there. I also see the product. I have tea with them. I say, wow, that's a great development. You know, you see things that you wouldn't see. But I think a problem a lot of people do is they allow their country manager to, let's say, manage their agents. Why would I think about it? That's the dumbest thing I've ever. I don't understand why people do that. So a company says, okay, I will, and I want to say, in the past, I've worked for both agents and factory direct, so I know how to sell the angle. You know, depending on what chair you're sitting in, oh, agents are better, no, factory direct is better. But if you're a brand and you have your own office and you decide, let me compete, let me check the other factories, and I'm going to nominate an agent to do that, and you then tell your country manager to manage that agent. Let's see if that agent comes back and really makes that country manager look like an idiot. Is he ever going to give you the honest information? No. He's never going to tell you, wow, I've been sourcing this same 180 GSM slub t-shirt for $2.75 for 5 years, and they're able to do it for $2.20. That's going to open up a whole other can of worms. So you have to think about how you're going to create a level of transparency within your organization, and how do you empower your employees to actually work as if they own the company. It's very hard. Because everyone wants to go home at 5 o'clock and play with their children and their dogs. No one wants to sit and Skype at 3 in the morning or go to, you know, Chittagong and negotiate. But again, I think that's what separates the successes from the...
Yeah, you need to have direct relationships. You need to physically be in the locations. Otherwise, you're just a random somebody, and it doesn't matter. And for 5 cents here or there, you might actually get the 5 cents because you have the relationship. You don't even deserve it. I need it. We've been partners. You need to do this for me. I've done things for you. And that works. But you also, I mean, there's a sphere of control. There's a compliance piece. They're going to show you the new stuff. They're going to show you the cool new thing that, you know, you're sitting there and you run in the back room and they bring the like, yeah, I want to show this to you. Because you have that relationship, you have to physically connect with the people you're doing business with.
Cool. So let's physically connect with the audience and see if anybody has any questions. We have about 10 minutes for questions. So. Yes, Rob?
How do we bring everything back to this country? And why can't we instill with good PR, which we use for everybody, everything from soap to a movie star, that it's not demeaning to work and sew? Why can't it be represented as an artisan skill so that you get some of the people who work the factories here? I remember in the 60s, South Carolina and Alabama came to us and said, we'll build the factories for you. We will put in the machines for you. Why? All of these states are complaining about not having full employment. Why can't we get the states to do that, and why can't the industry get after all of these people to redevelop this country? Yes, it makes the time element, the fact that 25, if you have new companies, they need 2,500 pieces of color, okay? If you're starting out and you make a mistake and the shoulder strap is slightly too wide, that 7,500 that you made with the wrong shoulder strap goes in the basket. You can't eat it with marinara sauce. Isn't there a way that, as an industry that we can teach the young people to be proud of the craft of sewing and talk and get the people who run the government to instill with the governors that their states could benefit by having industry.
Yeah, I'm going to make, I guess, a little comparison, right? Because you use the word craft, like craft beer, right? How we got all these, like,
Excuse me, can you reiterate her question?
So the idea is, how can we bring everything back to the United States? So, and is there any way of doing it through artisanry, right? Because we do have know-how and we have artisanry. So there's niche markets, right? Like what we call the craft beer market. What I think is really cool, which I'm watching happen every day in Intimates, is we've got these little brands popping up with some great ideas. There's actually an interesting article that came out yesterday too about it. And they're all, they all would love to dive in. And it's very hard. The retail community doesn't make it very easy for any small brand to come in. So what we're looking at, and we're looking at it from a brand perspective, we're looking to set up a marketplace for smaller brands. So we're actually, it's taking, I think, another brand, or a couple brands, because I've discussed this with a couple brands, to create a forum, almost like an Etsy, or like, what eBay was at the time when they started, somewhere where people can put their goods on. The issue is we as consumers also struggle to give enough respect, right? Or is it brand authentic, or is it consistent? And that's something that's difficult that we have to transcend. In Italy, we see it in the food market. It's really amazing how you find something like Italy, which is right around the corner now, can bring in all these brands, but at the end, there still is a huge conglomerate at the top that's bought them all up and kind of joined them. So I do think that there will be some unique artisanry that can happen, but from a scalability side, I think it's a struggle.
I'm not a politician or a rabbi. I would have to be both to answer that question. I think, all we talk about is the factory level, right? You have to talk at the consumer level. It's really interesting. I guest taught a class at FIT last semester. It was on sustainability and eco-textile, which is funny because anyway. The same student that said, I want to start a brand, and I want to make it with bamboo and, grass, or whatever he was talking about. I said, I have a question for you. What phone do you have in your pocket? Of course, he took out an iPhone. Now, what did that cost her? $500. There's no Father's Day sale at the Apple Store. Then I said, where are you drinking your coffee from? He goes, Starbucks. Again, there's no buy one, get one free Mother's Day sale at Starbucks. You pay $5 for the coffee. Where are you wearing your t-shirt from? H&M. What did you buy it for? I don't know, $8.99, $9.99. I said, well, would you be willing to buy that shirt for $60? He goes, no, I'm a student. I work at Trader Joe's. I go, but you made a decision to spend $500 on a phone, and $5 on a coffee, and $8 on a t-shirt. I said, I can make it in North Carolina out of the finest Supima cotton sewed by someone's great-grandmother. It doesn't work. It does not work, and it just doesn't work for the person that wants to buy it at $8.99. Because even if you go to Barney's, there's 50% off sales. So we've trained post-recession every day as friends and family. There is every day. And the thing is, even if you buy something that's not on sale, you just go back with the receipt. And they'll give it to you. So we have margin compression at the factory level and at the retail level. That's problem number one. The second thing is, let's look at the world on a global level. Yes, there's problems in this country. Yes, there's underemployment. That's something we don't talk about. There's much more underemployment than there is unemployment. If you will devastate the world, from a global perspective, if you eliminate all these countries, Bangladesh, 90-something% of their exports is garments. You know what raw materials they have there? Nothing. Have you been to Bangladesh? There, other than a stench. So, their biggest commodity, although it's horrible to say, is their cheap labor. So, yes, it would be good for a small town in South Carolina to put up another mill. And it's happening. There is investment here. But from a global perspective, I think if we look at everyone as equal, there's a lot of people that would hurt if that happened as well. So, and to say, why are we embarrassed to be an artisan? I don't think we're embarrassed. I really want to be a sculptor. Right? I love to sit on my student. Can't pay my rent. Until you tell the landlords not to charge $5 grand a month for a one-bedroom, then maybe I'll go back into my sculpting passion. The whole economics of this country is the same reason why we say, why is there no money for cancer research? I remember when Farrah Fawcett died, there was this big special, and this doctor said, no, there's plenty of money for cancer research. There's no scientists to do the research. Because today, if you're a Harvard scholar or an MIT scholar, it's better for you to create an app with birds flying around, and you sell it for $100 million, than try to do some gene mutation therapy in a lab. That's not cool, right? You want to go to a hedge fund and make $1 billion and get arrested for insider trading. What do you care, right? It's the morals, it's the culture, it's society that needs to change. That's a very roundabout way of saying I think that'll never happen.
It's green.
Yeah. And even, here's the thing, because I just wrote an article that's coming out this week about life after Rana Plaza. Has life changed for the workers? And I said you got to look at that in two perspectives. One, has life changed for the workers inside the factory? And I'll say, in many respects, it has. There's more exits, or maybe the exits work. Maybe they get their wages, they've upgraded the facilities a little much. Yes. There is the Alliance in the Accord have shut down some factories. There's an awareness. You should feel safer today, working a rivet machine in a factory. No doubt. However, how's your life outside the factory? You have your wages may have increased 100%, 50%, but the inflation, the cost of living, has gone up. We can't keep up with the inflation. And that brings in the concept of a fair living wage. So the fair living wage is much, much higher than the wages that these workers are earning. So how has their life changed outside the factory? It has. So and then we say, all these companies, you think if tomorrow you pay 5 more cents, 10 more cents, will the factory owner give it to the worker? Or let's say this, if the consumer pays $2 more for the shirt, will the board of trustees, who has an option between flying a private jet and getting a dividend, give it to the factory so they can give it to the workers? Again, I'm not a rabbi. I don't think so. So until we change our mindsets as human beings, the world's got a long way to go.
Do we have any other questions? Yep. Sorry. Yes? Yeah, go ahead. No one use Steve. Steve, yeah.
What can you address what's being done about the proprietary transfer of knowledge from design to the manufacturing process, protection of the transfer of knowledge from manufacturing?
Any idea on the...
For instance, if you show somebody how to make a bra, there's an intricacy. They can get protection. Is there international protection that you know of?
So what processes do you guys do on IP for international protection? Maybe you have some comments there.
Yes, there are processes. We can create, we do. We have lots of processes. We have NDAs, we have non-compete agreements, we have the people we can purchase from, it's captive to us. It's really about the enforcement of it. Candidly, they're bullshit.
Have you ever sued anyone in Chennai?
Have you ever had an occasion where you transfer knowledge, transfer the manufacturing process, paying the price, Walmart came in, with a much larger order, they took that technology and gave it to Walmart?
So, yeah, the question is more about intellectual property and if anyone's protecting it, especially when it's crossing oceans and so forth into sourcing, and if anyone's taking an idea and mass producing it for others.
See, the question is, you make your product, it's in the factory for 3 months, it's proprietary. It hits the shelf, it's a target. I could buy the sample and go knock it off.
Public debate.
And everybody does.
Right, everything's cut and paste. So, how do you protect it? Unless you have a real novel idea.
Create a new one.
But that's, what does Nike do? They're ahead of the curve. You're an innovator. You got to create great product. Everyone else. There's a book, Chasing Cool, right? A great book by Gene Pressman. Hello. Another guy. Lululemon has a proprietary formula for their pants, and they'll tell you that one factory that had the full out last year, and you can see everyone's tush, no one else can replicate it. That doesn't stop 10 other people from getting into the yoga market. Now, women who could afford $150 or whatever it costs will tell you they're the best. It's the same thing for Uniqlo heat tech. I made many mistakes in trying to knock that off and been unable to do that. When other people come in with their own iterations of it, I mean, I think you have to have good factory partners is the bottom line. The majority, the reality is, every factory will tell you to your face, I do not show your product to anyone else. And then I continue to walk through factories and I see everyone else's product.
Yeah, I think for the sake of time for one more question, definitely it's a constant debate and a constant issue. I don't know if there's a way to ever resolve that issue, but it's innovation. It's really innovation. If you wanted to give your final question.
I read an article recently where there's a new, some companies are trying a new method of manufacturing where they're using a module setting where instead of one person sewing 10,000 pieces of the same thing and then passing it out 10,000 on to the next person, that the people who are making the full garment, there's like 5, 6, 7, 8 people and their desks or sewing are all right together. And they sew one part of the garment that there was before, they hand it to the next person on the middle, and it's one garment that they
So
that's still going on for 20 years.
That's the only manufacturer I've ever seen.
it's a question.
It's a line. Everyone's specializing in one thing.
Sewing line, and that's been going on for years. No, but
No.
the factories that I've been in say somebody will sew up the seams, okay? And they sew up they sew up a batch. They pass the batch off to the
It's a
next
chain. You see the chain. And it's
Okay, so this is different than that. This is different. They're sewing one sleeve. That sleeve is going to the person who's going to sew the neck or the top part. Then that section goes to the next person. So it's just one garment being sewn completely.
One person.
Vanity Fair did that 30 years ago. Well, there's talk now that some companies are doing it. Well, maybe they are. Maybe.
I'm not familiar as a brand. We definitely do more, everyone's
When you do
specific.
the whole garment.
Specific thing and it goes on. It's a way of also quality control.
Yeah.
With one person checking the work of the other.
Factories are trying to improve their efficiency. And the only way they can make any more money is instead of making 50 pieces in an hour, how do you make 55 pieces in an hour? So yes, I mean, I was in Vietnam and the owner of the factory, he was a Korean gentleman, he says, next time you're at a stoplight, I want you to notice all the women are like this on their bikes. Like I'm sitting like this right now. They're sitting like this on their bikes. He says, good posture helps speed the line. So you're trying to find every little advantage. I mean, we're talking about is every factory I've ever seen, and granted, maybe I've only been to the shittiest factories in the world. They're all using that line.
You're saying this method is faster, and that you think that stays faster.
I'm not aware, and I think.
I've not seen that anywhere.
But
Batch selling is what I've seen.
But
So
thank
I
you
might be
very
the same shitty factories.
I think we have to conclude here. I want to thank everybody for coming and our panelists. It was an awesome discussion. So we're opening up a factory on 7th